Have you ever wondered what would happen if Antarctica completely melted? This is not a question to be taken lightly. Antarctica, the frozen continent at the bottom of our world, is an icy behemoth that's been quietly shaping our planet's destiny. But it's been making some noise lately. Just recently, in the year 2023, we've seen sea ice levels in Antarctica plummet to record lows. This isn't an isolated incident, it's happened before in 2017 and 2022. It's a worrying trend that's been observed in both the Arctic and Antarctic regions, and it's being driven by the relentless march of global warming. Renowned scientists like Walter Meyer and Professor Martin Siegert have been sounding the alarm bells. They're concerned about what an unstable Antarctica could mean for our global climate. The rapid melting of ice shelves and the record temperature increases we've seen there are most certainly not promising signs. But these aren't just distant events happening on a remote continent. They're harbingers of potential devastating consequences for all of humanity. Rising ocean temperatures are driving these record lows in sea ice levels, and these changes could very well be irreversible. Remember the massive lake in Antarctica that vanished within days? It held 21 to 26 billion cubic feet of water, equivalent to twice the volume of San Diego Bay. It left behind a visible sinkhole, a stark reminder of the power of climate change. So let's ponder this unthinkable scenario. Imagine, if all this ice were to melt, what would be the consequences? To understand the potential outcome, we first need to understand the science behind melting ice. The process behind melting ice is quite straightforward, yet its implications are far-reaching. When the temperature rises above the freezing point, ice transforms into water, a phenomenon we've all witnessed. However, the real issue at hand is not just the transformation of ice into water, but the rise in oceanic temperatures that triggers this transformation at an alarming rate. Now, let's examine the relationship between rising ocean temperatures and reduced sea ice levels. The ocean absorbs about 90% of the heat trapped by greenhouse gases. This absorbed heat warms the water, leading to the melting of sea ice. Sea ice has a reflective surface that bounces back most of the sun's rays into space, a process known as the albedo effect. When sea ice melts, it reveals darker ocean waters that absorb more sunlight and heat, further heating the ocean and triggering a vicious cycle of melting and heating. Moreover, as the ice melts, it adds more water to the ocean, contributing to rising sea levels. But it's not just the melting of sea ice that's a concern. Land-based ice, such as the massive ice sheets covering Antarctica, when melted, also adds a significant volume of water to the oceans. Recent observations, such as the record lows in sea ice levels in Antarctica, are a result of this escalating cycle of heating and melting. The transformation of a massive lake into a sinkhole due to hydrofracture, a process driven by surface melt, illustrates the volatile dynamics of ice melt and its potential to destabilize the Antarctic ice shelves. The science behind melting ice is not just about thermodynamics. It's a story of complex interactions between the sun, the sea, and the ice, all under the influence of climate change. Now that we understand the science, let's delve into the potential consequences. So, what could happen if Antarctica were to melt completely? Well, let's delve into the potential consequences, shall we? Firstly, we'd be looking at a significant global sea level rise. Renowned scientists like Walter Meyer and Professor Martin Siegert have expressed their concerns about this. Remember the record low sea ice levels in Antarctica we saw in 2023? Those were largely due to rising ocean temperatures, and if Antarctica were to melt completely, we could see the sea levels rise by a staggering 200 feet. Imagine for a moment coastal cities like Miami, New York and Shanghai being entirely underwater. But the sea level rise is just the tip of the iceberg, pardon the pun. Changes in ocean circulation would also be a major concern. With the influx of so much fresh water into the ocean, we could disrupt the delicate balance of our ocean's currents. These currents act like a global conveyor belt, transporting warm water from the equator to the poles and cold water in the reverse direction. Any disruption to this system could have extreme effects on our climate. Now, let's talk about wildlife. Antarctica is home to a multitude of creatures, from the mighty emperor penguin to the tiniest krill. These species have adapted to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. But if their icy home were to disappear, these species could be at risk of extinction. The loss of these animals would not only be a tragedy in itself, but could also disrupt the food chain, affecting species worldwide. And of course, we can't forget about the impacts on human life. As sea levels rise and climates shift, we could see a mass displacement of people. Those living in low-lying areas would be forced to move inland or to higher ground, leading to overcrowding in some areas and potentially sparking conflicts over resources. Plus, the economic cost would be enormous, with the loss of coastal infrastructure, agriculture and fisheries. But it's not just about the physical effects. There's also the psychological impact to consider. The loss of Antarctica, a place of beauty and wonder, would be a stark reminder of our failure to protect our planet. It would be a grim symbol of the irreversible damage we've inflicted on our world. And let's not forget the scientific loss. As we saw with the sudden disappearance of a massive lake in Antarctica back in 2020, this icy continent is a valuable resource for understanding our planet's history and predicting future climate changes. If Antarctica were to melt, we'd lose this vital source of information. These consequences paint a grim picture, but is there anything we can do about it? Is there anything we can do to prevent such a catastrophic event? The answer is a resounding yes, and it begins with tackling global warming and climate change head-on. We're living in an era where our actions are having a profound and devastating impact on our planet. The melting ice caps are a clear sign that we need to change our ways, and fast. First and foremost, we need to reduce our carbon emissions. The burning of fossil fuels like oil, coal and gas for electricity and heat is the largest single source of global greenhouse gas emissions, the main driver of climate change. By transitioning to renewable energy sources like wind, solar and hydroelectric power, we can significantly cut down on these emissions. Secondly, we need to preserve and restore our forests. Trees are natural carbon sinks, absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere and storing it in their trunks, leaves and roots. Deforestation not only releases this stored carbon back into the atmosphere, but also reduces the number of trees available to absorb future emissions. Thirdly, we need to change our consumption habits. This includes everything from the food we eat to the products we buy. By choosing plant-based meals over meat and dairy and buying products with less packaging or made from recycled materials, we can lessen our individual carbon footprints. But it's not just about what we can do as individuals. We need systemic change. Governments, corporations and organizations worldwide need to commit to climate action. This means investing in green technology, implementing stricter environmental regulations, and holding polluters accountable. Moreover, we need more research. As the disappearance of the massive lake in Antarctica shows, there's still so much we don't know about how climate change is affecting our planet. We need to monitor and collect data on the implications of surface melt on rising sea levels and climate change. While the situation is dire, there is still hope if we act now. We have the knowledge, the technology and the capability to make a change. It's time to put them into action. To sum it up, if Antarctica were to melt completely, the consequences would be catastrophic. We've delved into the science behind melting ice, understanding how rising global temperatures are causing a steady decline in the ice cover of both the Arctic and Antarctic regions. We've seen how satellite imagery from the National Snow and Ice Data Center has shown record lows in sea ice levels, and how the sudden disappearance of a massive lake in Antarctica has demonstrated the instability of the ice shelves. We've also discussed the potential consequences of such an event. The implications for global climate are severe, with scientists like Walter Meyer and Professor Martin Siegert warning of potential devastating consequences for humanity. The rise in sea levels, the change in ocean currents, and the impact on wildlife are all part of this bleak picture. But we've also looked at what we can do to prevent this scenario. The need for further monitoring, data collection and action to combat climate change is clear. While the scenario of a completely melted Antarctica is a gloomy one, it serves as a stark reminder of the urgent need to address climate change now.